Hi, I'm Bubb, and I'd like to welcome everyone. I'm so glad you're all here and that you're ready to learn how to stand out in a sea of blandness. I will be answering questions after my talk, so feel free to share those in the chat window. I will also be adding a link to the chat so you can download handouts for today's discussion to support your learning. And throughout today, I'm going to be sharing stories from my clients and from my own experiences to be as helpful to you as possible so you can create or enhance a career story that wows. And I want to share, I'm just so thrilled to be part of today and the theme of authenticity. It's literally part of the name of my business, Work Authentically, and it's a key part of the work I do with all my clients to ensure that authenticity is weaved into their careers and their lived experiences. And so I want to start today with a story from my career. I spent 20 years as a woman in tech doing software development. And this is a story of a particular time when I needed to surface my authenticity. All I could think was, it's happening again. I felt the color in my cheeks as they flushed hot, a mix of anger, frustration, embarrassment. I started my breathing techniques to settle my body and mind, knowing that an outburst would get me labeled as too emotional. And that was a label people were all too quick to apply to women leaders in this space. So how did I get here with steam practically coming out of my ears as I gripped the armrests of a well-worn office chair? Well, I'd shared a great solution to a problem with a group of people who were trying to solve it. In fact, it was a problem we'd set up the meeting specifically to resolve, knowing we had the right expertise in the room to address it and move on. A male colleague had grabbed the whiteboard pen and started writing possibilities down. The squeak of the marker on the board was noticeable as the initial brainstorm got started. I'd spent the beginning of the meeting listening to various points of view, and that's when the solution struck me. Shared it as part of the conversation, but he kept talking without ever acknowledging my suggestion. He didn't even write it down. There was no squeak of the marker to capture what I'd shared. And it wasn't the first time he'd done this, which is why all I could think was, it's happening again. Maybe another day I would have sat silently and fumed, but not this day. Something changed within me. I was tired of being ignored, of having my ideas overlooked, of being treated as not worth being heard. Of course, there was still the risk of being labeled if I took a stand for myself. I weighed my options, wondering if my fear and self-doubt would win this internal battle. But I heard a voice, my authentic voice, telling me to stand up and be heard, that my voice mattered and that I could share it in a way that was clear and impactful without being threatening or angry or emotional. So I took a deep breath and I raised my hand. Yep, just like a kid does in elementary school like this. And with that simple action, he called on me to ask what I needed. I glanced around the room at the coworkers. They were more than a little curious about what was going to happen. And I said, hey, I've got a quick question. Am I saying my ideas out loud or are they only in my head? Did anyone else hear the last idea I shared? As you can imagine, it was dead silent. I waited, knowing that whatever came next, people would remember this moment. The woman sitting next to me stifled a giggle and said loudly, I heard you. Another male colleague spoke up and acknowledged my idea and the fact that it had merit. This wasn't necessarily the way that I'd planned to approach the meeting, but deep within me, I knew if I didn't change my approach, I wouldn't be able to change my trajectory. You see, I had ambitions to be promoted, to become a senior leader, and I wasn't being seen as one. If I wanted to join the ranks of the suit-wearing, briefcase-toting decision makers, rocking my own unique style, obviously, I needed to shift perceptions. I knew I couldn't change him, the guy who consistently talked over not only myself, but most women in meetings. So I needed to change my approach instead. That day, when I interrupted the flow of the meeting to call attention to what was going on, I stepped into my leadership. The conference room was exactly the same as it had been the moment before. The long rectangular wood table surrounded by black office chairs, adjusted to the preferences of whoever was in the room before we got there. The clear walls on one side and the nondescript art on the opposite wall. And of course, the entire wall covered in whiteboard with the squeaky pen that had stopped in its tracks for the second time this meeting as its holder considered what to do next. Externally, I continued to sit as I had before, holding the arms of my chair, but finally relaxing my grip. Internally, the anger and frustration and embarrassment melted away. In the space where I'd been holding that pent-up frustration inside, I was filled with a renewed confidence and belief that I hadn't felt in a long time. As my body relaxed and the color of my face returned to its natural hue, I realized that although the conference room appeared exactly the same, I had changed the environment. It had become a space where everyone, including me, was going to be heard. I finally felt like the authentic version of me, and that changed everything for me. And so, as much as I'd like to believe that my story is a singular one-time event, like a unicorn magically appearing out of the mist, I know from my experience and the experiences that my clients have shared with me, it wasn't. And it turns out unicorns aren't all that infrequent either. And at first, that's great. If you're a child of the 80s like me, you go, ooh, cool, unicorns, and you feel happy inside, at least at first. But then you look around and you start seeing unicorns everywhere. And it's so much more than just toys. It's unicorn cups and eye pillows and pool floaties. Even food, the unicorns are everywhere, and they're not alone. They're accompanied by cacti actually, of every shape and size. And sloths, wild sloths, cartoon sloths, these sloths saying funny stuff, even sloths on a wall mural wearing headphones and chewing gum. So especially if you have kids, and more than likely, even if you don't, you probably have at least one of these items somewhere in your home or on your person. So why do I bring all that up? Because it's critical for your career story. And what do I mean by career story? Well, it's your resume and LinkedIn profile, of course, that's what everyone thinks of, but it's your digital portfolio, it's your personal brand, it's everything related to how you tell others about the work you do. And if you're like most people, it's probably one of the most underutilized tools that you have. So what's the unicorn cactus sloth version of a career story? It's this: highly motivated, results-driven professional with a demonstrated history. When you first hear it, it sounds impressive, but let's break it down a little. Anyone else besides me highly motivated? I'll bet there's some. Anyone results-driven or have to be because your bonus is tied to results? Yeah, I hope so. Anyone here work more than a day and as such is a professional with a demonstrated history? Not only does this collection of buzzwords not say anything meaningful, it doesn't help you stand out. This describes everyone here today. You probably know a unicorn cactus sloth or two at work. You might be thinking of them right now. It's that person that's always throwing around meaningless buzzwords and sayings. It sounds like this: at the end of the day, let's throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks so we can create synergies for our digital transformation. Gross. You don't want that in your career story or in your work. It's what I call the Sea of Blandness. It's the collection of language, buzzwords, and acronyms people use to talk about the work they do. Now, there's nothing wrong with using common or popular terms, but when everyone's using the exact same words in the exact same way, those words start to lose their meaning, just like seeing a cajillion unicorns. Anyone who has ever had to wade through a stack of resumes will tell you it can be mind-numbingly boring. There's nothing worse than reading dozens of resumes from candidates that are all the same. And when that becomes the story everyone's telling, you need to be willing to tell a different story, a better story, one that more accurately and authentically reflects the amazing work you do. And when you do this, you stand out in the sea of blandness. You're surfing above it. Of course, it can be a challenge to get comfortable standing out when everything in your brain and everything you read on the internet and everything your good friend has told you about your career center on fitting in and doing what everyone else is doing. So why do we want to stand out when it comes to career stories? It's to give yourself an edge whenever you can. When you're being considered for a job or promotion or an interesting assignment, they're considering a bunch of candidates that are more or less equally qualified. There's not a dramatic difference between anyone they're considering. So standing out just a little bit in that sea of blandness gives you a huge advantage. So let's focus today on the three key components to help you tell a compelling career story that stands out from the Sea of Blandness. When it comes to your career story, it really comes down to these three must-have components. Authority, you want to show your expertise at every opportunity. Advantage, you want to demonstrate the immense value you bring. And you want to make it authentically you. This is your unique approach, your style, your way of being. And again, if you want the handouts for all of this to support your learning, I am adding that to the chat right now. Now, some people are going to say, Allie, is it really this simple? Is this all I need? The answer is yes. Yes, this is what you need to tell a compelling career story. And for my overachievers in the room, because I know there's always a couple, there are some considerations that can help add on to your story, but not until you have those three key components. You've got to make sure it's got that authority, your advantage, and make it authentically you first. And once you do that, then you can think about algorithms. Remember that your resume and LinkedIn profile are subject to algorithms, but so is everything you say. Humans run algorithms too. Aesthetics, you want it to be visually appealing. So review how your content displays on mobile and laptop versions. Accuracy, you want to tell your best story, and of course, make sure it's a true story. And amounts, you want to include data to show the magnitude of your impact. There's a big difference between a $1 million budget, a $10 million budget, or a $100 million budget. So help people understand. So I hope you can see already with those components and those other considerations, you have full control over your career story. You get to decide how to show your authority, your advantage, and make it authentically you. Because again, this is all about giving yourself that slight edge, that little bit extra to be the clear choice for that job, that role, that cool assignment that is perfectly aligned to you. You want to be surfing over that sea of blandness. And so how do we do it? Well, let's talk about 2 tips for career in general. And I want to remind everyone first and foremost that you want to get intentional. That is a critical part for your career. So often I talk with people and basically they've kind of let their career happen to them. They kind of wake up one day and aren't sure how they got there. And so I want to remind everyone that the more intentional you are, the more likely it is that you're going to get where you want to go with your career. So that's my first tip. My second tip is I want to encourage you to look for opportunities to tell your career story. Start your week looking at your calendar. Take a look at what meetings you have, what discussions are going on, who are you going to be talking with? I guarantee when you start doing this, you're going to be surprised by how many options you find. All right, so let's dive a little deeper then. We want to focus our energy on those 3 must-have components of the career stories and look at how we can incorporate those into several different areas. These are the areas that people always ask me about. These are the areas that most people struggle with. And so we're going to spend a little time here. And of course, these are all deep topics. I'm just scraping the surface on the possibilities. We could easily spend a really long time on each of these, but my goal for today is to give you a couple of tips for each of these areas. So let's start first with personal brand. And I want to remind you to consistently show up and bring your unique blend. Your personal brand is your reputation. It's what others think about what it's like to work with you. And you want to make it clear to people what they get when they're working with you, because it's different when they work with me or anyone else here today. So first tip, you don't want your personal brand to be the off-center, unflattering selfie version of you. So once you decide how you want to be perceived at work, you got to show up that way consistently. And I'm betting that the way you want to show up is the 5-star, definitely recommend, always delivers version of you. And when you consistently show up and deliver, you get to guide people toward the personal brand that you want to have. All right, my second tip is to help other people understand your strengths. One of my favorite questions to ask my coaching clients is, what's your superpower? These are those things that you do differently and better than anyone else. Make sure you know those. Make sure you share those. All right, let's move along to introductions and networking. This is an area of awkwardness that most people dread, even though we know exactly what's going to happen. When you meet someone, what's the first question they ask after your name? Yeah, it's what do you do? I could say I'm a career coach, but after we both say what we do, the conversation's basically over. So instead, when someone asks, hey, Allie, what do you do? I say some version of, I transform careers by helping people step into their next level of leadership. And most of the time people respond with, ooh, tell me more about that. And that creates an opportunity for some really great conversation. So if you haven't already, think about what you do, how you do it, and why you do it. You know, we're so literal. When someone asks us what we do, that's how we respond. But the more interesting answer is always going to be in the how and the why you do what you do. So my first tip is there's no rules that say you have to tell someone your official job title of Engineering Manager 3. Don't waste the opportunity to introduce yourself by saying your job title. Now, here's another question that we know is coming anytime we meet someone new, yet we always fumble around awkwardly when it comes our way. And that question is, tell me a little bit about yourself. So tip number 2, don't start off talking about your dog. This is your chance to highlight your strengths, to share your unique perspective and approach. You want it to be impactful. You want it to be all the amazing things you're great at. You want people to go, wow, tell me more about that. And I know you're thinking, but Allie, I want to be authentic. Great. Bring that in. At the end, say, on a personal note, I love dogs. I have 16 as pets, and I volunteer at an animal shelter on the weekends in my free time. But make sure that you keep the focus on your 3 must-have components as part of your answer to that question. And I'll tell you, one of my clients found this formula to be extremely helpful as an introvert who never really knew what to say at networking events. And they told me it was like having the answer to a test. All right, next up, we're going to talk about the need to activate your network. And I want to remind you that you can do this in a style that is true to you and your values. Don't feel like you have to do this in a way that makes you feel uncomfortable, in a way that you see other people doing and like, that's the only way to do it. There is a way to do this that works for you. All right, so my first tip, it's not a matter of if we need help from the people we know someday, it's a matter of when. Our careers are long and winding, and we need to work with people. I'll tell you a story that happened just this week. I needed to do a little research on a topic, and I could have just asked my good friend Google about it, but instead I decided to reach out to someone in my network who I knew would know something about this topic. And it was such a great experience because she was able to share what she knew. But on top of that, she was able to point me in some directions that I wouldn't have thought of on my own. And she was able to give a little insight and background into some things that I hadn't thought about yet. And boy, that's a lot easier than wading through 1.2 million results, isn't it? So know that as you're doing this, you're going to want to be reaching out for help when you need it. And so my second tip, relationships are the critical piece. There's a reason you've all heard the saying, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And I want to encourage you to activate your network because even with all the algorithms, more than 60% of jobs are still gotten based on who you know. And that doesn't mean that you need to be the nephew of a CEO. It means that as you're working with your network and you're reaching out to the people you know, they're likely going to recommend you to people to be hired. You are going to want introductions to people at various different places. And this is a really important piece. One of my clients that worked with me to create a compelling career story also took my advice about activating her network to heart, and she ended up with 3 job offers before our 6-week engagement was over. So I want you to know that relationships are incredibly powerful. All right, let's move on to resume. Can you believe how long I've been talking about your career story and I'm only just now getting to your resume? I hope you're seeing there are so many other opportunities every single day to tell your career story. So when you think about your resume, make sure you're thinking about highlights of your expertise and incorporating your strengths and personality. All right, so does everyone know what TLDR stands for? Too long, didn't read. So my first tip is make sure your resume doesn't fall into that category. On resumes, we often get so focused on showing everything we've ever done that no one can pick out the best work we've done. And if you don't stick to the highlights, no one is going to read it. The longest resume someone has sent me so far has been 5 pages. I've seen many with 4, and a really long resume was the reason those folks weren't making it to an interview. All right, so people often will ask me, well, how in the world can I bring my unique approach, my authentic self into my resume? That has to be a boring document, right? No, it doesn't. Let's talk about a really simple example. Problem-solving skills is something that's involved in almost every role at every level. Companies have lots of problems. They need employees to solve them. And so when you think about a problem solver, there's a thorough problem solver. They exhaust all solutions and possibly their teammates as they get to that solution. An imaginative problem solver is going to connect dots you never would have considered. A data-driven problem solver won't do X unless Y tells them to. That's one word, and it makes a big difference in what we're talking about for problem solver. All right, so let's move on to LinkedIn. And I want to encourage you to think of this like your resume plus. You are not limited by pages and formatting, so you get to tell a longer, more robust story here. So for LinkedIn, of course, you can include the full details of your experience, but also you get to demonstrate your thought leadership. You get to share interesting extras. It's a really powerful tool, and most people don't take advantage. So my first tip is I would encourage you to regularly look at LinkedIn. For some of my clients, actually most of them, they don't necessarily understand how LinkedIn can help them tell their best story. They haven't been exploring all of the features. But I want you to know they're rolling out new features regularly to help you tell a better story and to get found by people. And so make sure that you are regularly going out there, seeing what's new, experimenting, playing around with it. All right, so here's another tip. Not everyone knows about this feature, but it's super helpful, especially if you want to do a better job of activating your network. And basically, you can download a spreadsheet of all of your connections. I would suggest downloading this once a quarter. It's really helpful to keep track of who you've contacted. You can make sure that you're touching base with people on a regular basis. You can see if there's anybody you haven't reached out to in a while. It can be a good jumpstart if you haven't been working on your network to get things going and say, where should I start with this? It'll help you identify those places. So I would strongly encourage you to do that. And here's another super cool feature on LinkedIn that not everyone knows about. This can be really helpful when you're at either an in-person event or a virtual event. The best thing you can do is connect with the person you're talking to right on the spot. And all you have to do is get out your phone, open up LinkedIn, and find the search bar. You're welcome to do it right now, actually, to try it out if you want to. And within the search bar, you'll see a QR code icon that looks like 3 squares and an X. And when you click it, it will bring up a scanner, but there's also an option for my code. And when you click that, you can have the person that you're talking to scan yours and it'll take them right to your profile. So that makes it really easy to connect. If you want to test it out, you are welcome to go back to the scanner, hold it up to the screen and click on my profile. I would love for you to connect with me. I'd also ask that if you enjoyed our discussion today, that you endorse me for motivational speaking, career development coaching, and job search strategies. And the reason I bring this up is one, to show you an amazing feature on LinkedIn that I think you'll use a lot, and two, so that you can see how to ask for endorsements. People tell me all the time that it feels salesy or creepy to ask for those, and I hope you can see there's a way to do it that isn't either one of those things. All right, so I know navigating a career in tech isn't easy, but you have a net. You have this wonderful community of women and allies that I would strongly encourage you to take advantage of. You also now have those 3 key components so your career story stands out. There is no unicorn cactus sloth stuff happening here. And we talked through a whole bunch of strategies and tips that you can start using right now today. I'd also like to offer you another tool to support you on your journey, because I know all too well the possibilities and pitfalls of being a woman in tech. Several years after that fateful meeting where I raised my hand, I was finally ready for my next big thing. I made the deliberate choice to leave my leadership role in the corporate world and start my own career coaching business. I love coaching and developing others to move into the next level of leadership by helping them live and work authentically. I've seen firsthand what a dramatic difference it can make, and I want to help as many people as possible experience that same thing. So for all of you today, I hope you're enjoying what you're doing right now in tech. I want you to keep rocking it, keep getting promoted, because that's one of the ways we get more equity in leadership. And I also know it's not always possible to do on your own. Sometimes your career story doesn't stand out and help you shine so others see you at your best. Sometimes your personal brand isn't creating opportunities and opening doors for you so you can get to that next level. Sometimes you're facing systemic barriers and need a new plan. And so if you're ready to take your career story to the next level, if you want to have more money, meaning, and impact, if you want to create your own opportunities, I am offering a limited number of Rise and Shine strategy sessions. Don't worry, they're not early in the morning. I'm putting the link in the chat window right now. It's a call with me that I know you'll find incredibly valuable. It's designed to help you create a strategy to rise to the next level and shine brightly. We'll talk about how you can establish a meaningful vision for your career, how you can identify what's getting in your way, and get recommendations and information on how I can support you on your journey. Now, I'd love to talk with all of you, but there simply aren't enough hours in the day, and I have a limited number of spots. I added 15 Rise and Shine calls to my calendar in the next week. So if you're serious about working with a coach to make change happen, I'd encourage you to schedule something yet today, because I want to make sure you get the guidance you need to move forward. All right, so you now have those 3 key components so your career story stands out. You've got 2 tips for each of the areas that people ask me the most about. And I want to remind you of the one secret weapon you have. There is only one you. The most innovative, transformational thing you can be is authentic. So often we think that we need to learn something else, do something else, or become something else, when really the best way to stand out is by being your wonderful, amazing, unique, authentic selves. I'm Bubb. This is my digital business card. I'd encourage you to take a picture. You can see all the various ways to connect with me, and I would love to hear from you. I'd also like to remind everyone to be kind to yourself and others. Thank you.